The Gaza ceasefire began months ago. Here's why the fighting persists. Trump warns Iran ahead of talks, says its leaders should be very worried. Trump suggests softer touch needed on immigration. U.S. launches plan to reduce reliance on China for critical minerals. Washington Post guts staff, shrinks news coverage. Questions over the durability of the Gaza ceasefire intensified on Tuesday as dozens of Palestinians killed in Israeli airstrikes were brought to hospitals across the territory. "Where is the ceasefire? Where are the mediators?" wrote Mohammed Abu Salmiya, head of Shifa Hospital, in a social media post. According to Gaza Health Ministry, at least 556 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes since a U.S.-brokered truce came into effect in October. That figure includes 24 deaths on Wednesday and 30 on Saturday. In the same period, Israel Defense Forces said 4 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza, with several others wounded. The military reported that one soldier was severely injured overnight when militants opened fire near the ceasefire line in northern Gaza. Several key elements of the ceasefire agreement remain stalled. These include the deployment of an international security force, the disarmament of Hamas, and the launch of Gaza's reconstruction. The limited reopening of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt briefly raised hopes of progress, but fewer than 50 people were allowed to cross on Monday. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a fresh warning to Iran's leadership as U.S. military forces increase their presence in the region and uncertainty grows over planned diplomatic talks between Washington and Tehran. In an interview with NBC News on Tuesday, Trump said Iran's supreme leader should be very worried, adding that negotiations between the two sides are underway. The remarks came after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington remains open to talks with Iran, though he stressed that discussions cannot be limited solely to Iran's nuclear program. Rubio said the United States believed an agreement had been reached to hold talks on Friday in Turkey, but acknowledged confusion over the venue and format. He said Iran had initially agreed to a framework that later appeared to change. Iran has reportedly requested that the talks be moved to Oman and that regional countries be excluded from the discussions. The White House has not commented on those reports. Tehran is also seeking to limit the agenda to nuclear issues. However, Rubio said meaningful progress would require broader discussions, including Iran's ballistic missile program, its support for regional militant groups, and human rights concerns. U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested a softer touch may be needed in enforcing immigration laws, even as his administration insists mass deportations will continue nationwide. Trump made the comments in an interview with NBC News on Wednesday, following the fatal shootings of 2 protesters by federal officers in Minneapolis last month. The killings sparked widespread outrage and calls for an end to federal immigration raids in the city. "I learned that maybe we could use a little bit of a softer touch. But you still have to be tough," Trump said. Earlier, Trump's border enforcement chief Tom Homan announced that 700 federal officers would be withdrawn from Minnesota, though about 2,000 agents will remain. Homan said the drawdown would take effect immediately, but stressed that immigration enforcement operations would continue. In a later interview with Fox News, Homan said mass deportations would not stop, adding that the administration is already breaking records and intends to continue removals throughout the country. Local Democratic leaders welcomed the reduction in federal personnel but called for a faster and broader pullback. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said the operation known as Metro Surge should end immediately, while Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called for state-led investigations into the killings. The United States has unveiled a new initiative to create a trade zone for critical minerals, aiming to reduce global reliance on China, which dominates supplies essential for products ranging from smartphones to advanced weapons. The U.S. State Department hosted the first critical minerals ministerial on Wednesday, bringing together representatives from the European Union, the United Kingdom, Japan, India, South Korea, Australia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Talks focused on securing access to minerals needed for electric vehicle batteries, computer chips, and other high-tech manufacturing. While U.S. officials avoided directly naming China, Vice President J.D. Vance warned that foreign control of mineral supplies has distorted global markets and discouraged investment in alternative producers. Vance said the United States plans to use tariffs to prevent critical mineral prices from falling too low, protecting investment and encouraging production. A senior White House official, David Copley, said Washington intends to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into the mining sector, with funding already flowing to companies including MP Materials and Lithium Americas. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said the United States, Japan, and the European Commission are coordinating trade policies to safeguard access to critical minerals. The Washington Post has begun widespread layoffs that will significantly reduce the size of the historic newspaper, affecting all departments, according to a recording of a staff call obtained by Reuters. A spokesperson for the paper said the cuts will impact about 1/3 of all employees. The newsroom alone is expected to lose hundreds of journalists, according to the Washington-Baltimore News Guild, which represents Post staff. Executive editor Matt Murray told employees the reductions would affect the international, editing, metro, and sports desks. The move comes just days after the paper scaled back coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, citing mounting financial losses. Murray said the Post has operated for too long under a structure designed for an earlier era, when it functioned as a near-monopoly local newspaper, and that the organization needs a new foundation for the future. Founded in 1877, the Washington Post has faced declining readership and revenue, mirroring challenges across the newspaper industry, as audiences increasingly turn to social media for news. Among those affected by the layoffs are Amazon beat reporter Caroline O'Donovan, Cairo bureau chief Claire Parker, and the paper's Middle East correspondents and editors.